Hello. So today we are going to be learning a little bit about what this instrument is. This is a bodhran. It's an Irish instrument primarily. It's a frame drum, a type of frame drum. So it's hollow at the back and it's got a little bit of padding here. That's optional. I put that in. It's a little bit of pipe lagging actually, but it allows me to push my hand against the skin without busting my hand on a hard lump of wood. So that is what that does. So you can use that to bend the notes to make that higher. So I can pressure against the skin and it gets a high note. I can release it and it gets a low note. That kind of thing. But the real magic of this instrument is in this hand. So I learned bodhran when I was 18. I didn't learn it quite this way because it took me ages to get the action of what the twist of the wrist. It took me ages to figure out what that was. So I'm going to share my idea of how to play this. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold our hand up this way. And we're not going to hold it with a stick. We're just going to hold it up this way. And we're going to let our wrist flop over. So there's no tension in the hand at all. Yeah. And if you've ever burnt your fingers, you might have gone, oh, ooh, that's the action. Quite hard to tell in 2 dimensions, but if you wanted to move your hand back and forward, you don't use these muscles to do it. If you burnt your fingers, what you would do is you'd flick your wrist, so you'd flick it forward and then flick it back, so there'd be no muscles in your hand moving at all. Everything would be driven by this moving forward and this moving back, almost like throttling your wrist. And that is the motion of bodhran playing. So there's a counter motion. As your hand goes this way, your wrist goes that way. As your hand goes this way, your wrist goes that way. So there's always a rotation. It's not fixed in one location. It's not like a glove puppet saying no. I used to teach it like that and people ended up playing bodhran very stilted. But actually it's much more of a wrist counter movement, which you'd actually get if you burnt your fingers. It's that. Some things that people fall into, traps that people fall into, is they actually treat it like they have burnt their fingers and whip their fingers forward, and that's not the way. But if you gently move your hand back and forward in that motion, if there was a skin in the way, a skin of a drum, that would be sounding like, and there'd be no muscles in your hand doing that. It's all here. Just moving your hand backwards and forwards. So that's actually a bicep that's doing that. It's just moving your hand that way and moving your hand that way. But with a relaxed wrist, there is a little bit of a movement. So if you time it right, as your hand goes that way, you can be moving it that way. So it's ready to rock back and forward. Now that's obviously not the way that we play bodhran. We tilt that whole action 90 degrees and it's that action, but it's still that. It's just played that way around now. So the counterintuitive bit is to hold a stick while you're doing it, because as there's no tension in your hand, your fingers don't have any kind of grip over your stick. How to hold a stick, incidentally, is that you will hold it like a pen. So that's more or less how I'd hold a pen, about halfway up. Depends on the size of your stick, but that's sorry, but that's what it'll be. Slightly counterintuitive. Your hand is relaxed, but your fingers are slightly tense because they've got to hold that stick. So that's the way that would work. Now you tilt that whole action round, you end up with a bodhran action. So this is a particular style of bodhran playing. This is called low end. And it's called low end because you play it at the bottom of the bodhran. So that's all I'm doing. Just burning my fingers, ow, ow, ow. But you put that on the bodhran, you get a nice even beat. Now, if I was to keep an even beat, but occasionally flick at you, like I've got paint on the end of my fingers, that's where you can get the heavy beat. That flick is now towards the floor, but that's what that's doing. Flick it up as well. As I'm doing this, I can flick towards myself. I can get paint in my own face as opposed to on invisible piece of paper in front of me. So I can flick in both directions, and that gives me options to play harder notes in either direction. So you'd start off like that, and then you'd add a heavy note occasionally. So how about there, there, there. Can we add one on the way up? That gives it a different flavour, doesn't it? Go back to steady. Can I do 2 down? I don't know, hang on. Can I do a combination? Now, all of this is done on one end of the stick. Although you can hear quite a fast rhythm, it's not the other end of the stick. That will come in by itself. As you get that action in, you'll follow through very, very slightly, and that'll bring the other end in, and that'll sound like this. Very, very small difference. So yeah, that is a very, very quick lesson on the basics of how to play a bodhran. Hope you enjoyed it. Have fun.